So I'm very happy to introduce Don Thoma. Don is the CEO of Aireon. Prior to being at Aireon, Don had been with startups and large companies and really just has an amazing career that's on this edge of not just the edge of innovation, but the edge of the Earth, because he's dealing with satellites that are flying around, doing amazing things for us, and having really a part of the global infrastructure for this connected world. So we're really happy to have Don with us today. He's also somebody who's been investing a lot of time in Rensselaer recently, as we'll probably show in this conversation. So welcome, Don. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate the opportunity. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the discussion here. When I was talking to Jason and Kelly, they said, think about communicating to the students kind of your game plan, your kind of big strategy you laid out to start a company and to become an entrepreneur. Well, I'm going to disappoint you royally because I had no strategy when I started out. I started out just like you guys are, probably a lot less put together than all you guys are. An aeronautical engineer back in 1983. I picked aeronautical engineering because I liked planes. I didn't have to take a lot of chemistry. And that was really kind of why I did it. I was in Air Force ROTC while I was at RPI, which was interesting, but it was kind of the late 70s, early 80s. So military wasn't that big of a thing back then. But lo and behold, when I was getting ready to graduate, I had to go find something to do. So someone gave me a little piece of advice that said, don't let the Air Force pick what you're going to do. You pick what you want to do and try to get it. So I literally got a nice haircut, put my uniform on, and flew out to Los Angeles to go talk to the space division of the Air Force. Who knew, but the Air Force launched satellites and operated satellites, and that sounded pretty cool and a lot better than sitting in a missile silo somewhere in the middle of Nebraska. So luckily I got my name pulled out of the pile and went to work out at Los Angeles Air Force Base, and it was just a phenomenal experience. Launching big satellites on big rockets, it gave you a lot of experience for a young person right out of school. And in this case, you learn a heck of a lot quickly just by asking questions and keeping your eyes open. And I just found that the more you ask questions and the more you try to solve problems, the more responsibility they give you in that type of environment. So it gave me a chance to work on the Titan rocket. I was given kind of responsibility for a whole mission. So you kind of follow it from contract acquisition to launch, and you're the person in charge of coordinating all that activity. Lots of fun, things to do, certainly as an engineer. A lot of good things happen, also bad things happen. So for example, my first mission blew up on the launch pad and took out, billion-dollar satellite and a whole launch pad. It's actually the launch pad that launches the Falcon 9, SpaceX rockets now. But failure happens too, and you learn a lot from that also. I did realize that you had the opportunity in the Air Force; they would pay for your master's degree. So while I was out in Los Angeles, I went to USC and topped up my engineering. Quite frankly, I probably relearned my engineering because I should have studied harder maybe while I was RPI than I did. But this just gave me a chance to refresh everything and learn a whole bunch of new things that were really, really helpful to me at USC. I came up on the 5-year point because I had a master's degree. I had I got orders to go teach at the Air Force Institute of Technology. Decided I didn't want to teach. Sorry, Jason Kelly. So I had to make a decision whether or not to get out. I made the decision to get out, and a company caught my eye back here in Virginia. At the time, it was a startup company called Orbital Sciences Corporation. Three guys from the Harvard Business School, two of them were aerospace engineers, started a company and said, we're going to commercialize space. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. If you haven't learned this trick, you should do it, because I told them I'm going to be in your area. It just happened to be back on the East Coast. If you have a few minutes, I'd love to stop by your company and talk to you. And they said, sure. So I hopped on a plane and just stopped by their company one day and found out that they were working on this, a brand new system, basically to take, launch 100 pounds of payload to low Earth orbit, off the wing of a B-52. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool to do. And it was a really small team of people. It was, literally 15 of us that were the core team that built, tested, launched, the whole system. And, that kind of experience was just phenomenal in that case. That was really my first, taste of a new company, a blank canvas, because none of it had been done before and we had to go figure it out. So it's just the kind of thing where you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you say, if you just go in with, yeah, we can figure it out, it really is pretty cool. Someone has to go build the flight termination system. Yep, I can do that. Someone has to go develop the procedures to launch it off of the aircraft. Yeah, well, I've done something like that before. I can do that. And to get a team of people that energized to just do that is really, really, cool. And, and it has successes too. I mean, we won the National Medal of Technology for that project, back in 1990. But back to this thought of innovation and entrepreneurship in a startup company. As I was working 18-hour days out in the middle of the desert, putting this rocket together, I kept saying, well, how does this business stuff work? Okay, we're going to build this really cool thing, but how do you build a company around it? How do you sell something like this? And it just got me really thinking, hard about it. I don't know anything about that. So I guess I could have asked somebody, but I decided to go back and get an MBA instead. So I, while in the 6 hours when I wasn't working, I was typing up applications to business school, et cetera. And luckily I got accepted to the Harvard Business School, which really kind of knocked me out of my comfort zone, right? I mean, that environment was an environment where you're put in a room with, or in a school really, with 800 people that are from all different kind of backgrounds, capabilities, art history majors, bankers, lawyers, etc., doctors, and you learn about business. And to me, it really helped formulate a set of skills that are really important to innovation and starting a company. It's how to apply some of the analytical skills we learned as engineers and put them into a structure that lets you build a business around it. And I remember things I learned, cases that we did, to this day, and apply them. It's that kind of learning environment, which was great. So, what to do after that, so I had the bug, the entrepreneurship bug at that point. So I went back to another startup, a company called Orbcom. It was actually a spin out of Orbital Sciences. I was the 11th person to join the company, first sales and marketing person to join the company. And it was another situation with a blank canvas. Here, we're going to go launch a bunch of satellites to collect data from different things around the world. How do you go sell it? So this is where I kind of really learned the two things. One, the power of shoe leather marketing, right? Getting into coming up with a hypothesis, going out and talking to a lot of people, oil and gas, pipeline operators, to trucking companies, et cetera, understand their business to understand how our capability could help that area. So we actually, out of that, was in another situation where we actually spun another group out of this called Vantage Tracking Solutions that built a company around tracking trailers, right? So another learning experience on how you pick out an idea, build a product around it, and really involve the customer from day one. Now, this one didn't turn out too well because we ran out of money. We launched the satellites and ran out of money before we could get cash flow positive. So, it's a situation where, you learn a lot from that exercise. You get all the customers signed up, ready to go, you got your product going, but you can't sign up customers quick enough to pay the debt that you raised to launch those satellites. And what happens then is you put the company into Chapter 11, and you sell you basically sell the assets to, whoever will pay for whatever they'll pay for it, and restart the company there. So I left the company after that, went to another internet startup, but shortly after that, I got a call from a guy who basically bought the assets of another satellite company that failed. So you probably don't remember this. We were talking about Enron before, but back in 1999, Iridium was a company that was spun out of Motorola to basically provide satellite cell phones, right? I mean, this is hard for you guys to think about now because we all have cell phones. They work anywhere we want. But back in the 80s and early 90s, cell phones only worked in cities, and it cost a lot of money to use one overseas. So they created a satellite network with a big cell phone, if you will, to work for the global business travelers, right? Thinking that they needed a phone that would work anywhere. Well, they had a similar situation to the company I was with before, Orbcom. They launched a $3 billion system. Actually, it was a $5 billion system by the time it was done. And in the 10 years it took them to launch that network, everybody had a cell phone. GSM was a global standard. The market had completely moved away from them, and there was no way that they were going to make any return on their money. So the banks who had invested in them basically put them into bankruptcy. So the opportunity here came when a gentleman by the name of Dan Calusi, who was a kind of a serial entrepreneur, also kind of late in life too, that he did that. He said, "There's got to be a play here." So he basically bought the assets for about $30 million. So $5 billion system he bought for 30 million, raised about $170 million to fund it to cash flow positive. I joined the company to start their data business. So it was only a voice system at first, and we knew that it was a digital system, so we could make it into a data network as well. So we started a data business on that. So here's an example where an opportunity comes from someone else's failure. So I like to say I brought a company into bankruptcy, and then I got a chance to take one out of bankruptcy, which was pretty cool situation at that point. So you roll the clock ahead about 10 or 8 years at that point. The satellites are getting old. We got to launch more satellites. So we had to come up with a plan to launch the next generation of satellites at Iridium. So we spec'd it out. We kind of put all the marketing requirements around. I was running marketing for the company at that point in time, and we said, how do we fund a $3 billion kind of capex investment? We came up with this concept of renting space on each of these satellites. Now Iridium is unique. You can see the picture on the chart. It's a network of 66 satellites. Each of these satellites talks to the satellites around it, so it has a complete global view of the world and the ability to get data to and from any place on Earth in real time. So a very, very unique capability that did not exist, does not exist even today at that point. So we said, what could we do if you sold space on board each of those satellites to? We were thinking a government customer like the military or NASA or the European Space Agency. But it took the government forever to make up their mind, and we were running out of time because we had committed to build this $3 billion system, and we had to start committing to design and production of these satellites. So one of the areas that we were looking at, and if you look at the picture, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this little box here is about we just literally out of thin air said, let's make it 80 centimeters by 40 by 30, 50 kilograms of weight. We'll give it so much power. We'll give it so much bandwidth for communications. What could you do with that? And one of my tasks as the head of marketing was to go find these customers, and it was getting difficult to do. And we ran into, over that course of that process, we ran into some guys doing some studies on putting a little sensor on board that could pick up signals from the world's air traffic, right? So luckily, talk about timing, and timing's a really big thing. And starting a new company, or any innovation, the world's aircraft were being mandated to put these little transponders on board their aircraft that sent out their position at a very frequent basis. It could only be picked up by a tower, right? And there was only towers over potentially 30% of the world at that point. So we saw a big opportunity. If you were to put one of these sensors on board every new satellite, you would be able to basically have a full real-time picture of the world's air traffic. And we said, what could we do with that? Well, we built a business plan together. We started talking to customers, and we said, we really got to have a business here. So we went out and raised about $350 million over a course of three investments, started a separate company, formed a separate company. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Then they said, well, who's going to run this thing? And they said, well, yeah, you look like the right guy to run it. And I tell you, it's been fun, a blast ever since to see literally a idea on a PowerPoint slide turn into a global company. So to date, for example, we've been in operation since 2019. We've got 40 countries that are using this service. We've got a bunch of commercial entities that are using it for big data analytics, et cetera. It's kind of really, really cool that we've gotten to this point. So it's one of those things where an opportunity comes into play, you kind of put the right effort together. I mean, you think about it. I went to our board at Iridium and said, I need a couple $1 million of walking around money to figure this out, to do the technical studies, to do the market research, to build the business model up in a definitive way. And that seed money enabled us to raise a lot of money, to put satellites up in space. Not cheap. Elon Musk isn't cheap to launch your satellites. So, but it's up and now, and we've got a company down here in Northern Virginia that's, as I said, fully operational, surviving a global pandemic that's slowing down air traffic. But we just, for example, last week launched the service in India. So the full Indian airspace is now operational with our service, and we've got a whole series of them coming up. So just a couple my takeaways for what they're worth. You could throw them away. I had no idea that this was the path when I was back in your shoes. But one of the things that I did was just pay attention. What can you learn along the way? And first, you do something you like, right? If you don't do something you like, don't have a passion about it, you're going to wake up one day and say, why am I doing this? You're not going to have fun. You got to have fun the whole way. Just keep learning, right? Ask questions. You'd be amazed at what people will tell you if you just ask them to tell you. And any opportunity you get to get more education, use it, because what you learn in all those steps you apply at some point in your career, for good or for bad, right? Learn what to do and what not to do. Don't be afraid of kind of thinking big, because you can do it. I mean, I didn't say this, but at business school, I did a project where I looked at basically the concept for hosted payloads, for putting something on someone else's satellite and starting a business around it. I mean, I never thought anything of it when I did it, but it turned out to be the basic concept for Aireon at that point. Shit happens, right? Failures happen. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, but you just gotta roll with them and learn from them, and that's all you need to do. But because success happens also, right? And that's what comes out of it. But again, just life's too short. You got to have fun. That's what I would say. If you're not having fun, then go find something else to do.
Thanks, Don. Really appreciate that. I think it's an incredible story from all the different components. You started with education. We have a lot of students who are in the process of getting their education. What do you think you pulled out of the business education and the engineering education that were key skills that you continue to use throughout your role as CEO and even beforehand?
Yeah, well, once an engineer, always an engineer. You can't take it out of you. I always call myself the reformed rocket scientist. The thing that you learn, right, in the engineering side is a mindset for problem solving, right, and the ability to break down a problem into its parts and solve it. So it helped me at least kind of build a methodical way at looking at things. So even when I got to business school and start getting into marketing and finance and starting a company, it's always helped me to kind of structure things in a way that was understandable, made it easier to communicate to people, but it also just helped communicate it to to the team. So you learn that everything's interconnected, right? And that's kind of what I love about the job and love about kind of the progression of what I've done. You build upon everything that you've learned. So even if you think it's something trivial, especially when you start out, you end up doing a lot of stuff that is kind of mundane analysis and stuff like that. But as you go through that, for example, just watch, early on, it's, well, how did they go raise money to go build this company? And then I just ask, can I be part of that process? So you learn. Maybe you're not the leading it, but you learn about how it comes together. And it was funny. I was just having this conversation with our CTO the other day, and he said, I don't get how you can 1 second talk about kind of the software development with me, talk about orbital mechanics with the Iridium folks, talk about an accounting issue 3 seconds later. I said, well, because you don't have to understand all the details, but they're connected. And the things that you do on a contract may have an impact on what you build or how a customer buys your service. And a thing a customer says may turn into a new product idea. So what I love about it is by having that, both the business side and the engineering side, is it allows me to see how everything's connected together, and it just helps me communicate it to other parts of the company.
That's great. You've had to move on throughout your career of just being an individual contributor to someone who builds a team, hires people. When you're trying to decide whether somebody's going to be a fit for the organization, what are the things that you look at for this new potential team member?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really important thing, right? And it doesn't matter kind of where you are in your career. It should be very, very deliberate. I mean, I've talked to a lot of CEOs, a lot of people. They say that their hit rate on hiring is like 50% at best, right? So it tells you kind of the issue and the importance of getting the right team. And if anything you can see out of any project that you've worked on, or any big project, if a team's not working on it, it doesn't happen. We probably put a person through at least 8 or 9 interviews, before they, we make a hire. I've interviewed personally every person in our company. And in my case, you can think about if it's a VP that reporting to me, I go through a lot of detail on their background, but I'm not qualified to to know if this person has the right coding skills or the right legal contract skills, et cetera. But what I look for is really a cultural fit. Do they share kind of the values of the company, right, and the mission that we're trying to do? I mean, do they get energized by the fact that we've helped pull people out of the ocean who've been treading water because their plane had an engine failure in the Bahamas? When they have looked through our website and see those things and go, this is really cool what you're doing, right away that they've got a passion for it. I look at very carefully what questions they ask me. Very telling when they, the kinds of things that they're asking me, and it's that kind of passion and team-oriented culture, that I'm looking for in the person to give the final yay or nay. And we try to build this in, for the rest of the company. We built this into a deliberate process, right? What are we looking for? What skills? What personality? We do some personality tests on, like personality. I may not have done them yet, but some of you guys know what they are. It just tells you, are you an outgoing person or an introvert? Are you, a team-oriented person? Do you like to get things done quickly, or do you like to sit back and analyze? And every job requires a different mix of those things, and that's the kind of things that we look for, when we're trying to pick a person. Not just their technical skills, but also do they have the right kind of cultural fit.
Yeah, definitely. students are also in the process of, trying to figure out what type of companies they want to apply to, where they want to work, and so forth. You started and had this kind of amazing journey. What do you think you got out of those initial opportunities to be in a startup rather than maybe if you had joined Boeing or GE as some of your initial companies?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started in a really, really big company, right? The Air Force at that point, and kind of saw what that was like. Which, I was a little bit lucky because the space part was not the typical rigidity of kind of what you would think a command structure for a military organization. It was a more professional environment. Earlier in your career, it's really what you're looking for because you can learn a lot out of either path. And if you go to a Boeing or or a Northrop or someone like that, you're going to get a lot of structure. You're probably going to get a siloed assignment, right? So you'll kind of drill deep into something. My daughter's a mechanical engineer for L3 Harris, and she's working on this thing, right? And that's hers, and she's completely focused on it. So, but you can learn a lot out of doing that, and if you'll grow in that and get more responsibility over time, but it's a little slower, right, to do that. But the structure is good because they typically have educational programs and learning programs and things like that. Startup environment is I said it earlier, it's like a blank canvas, right? You walk in, it's a big idea, but there's typically not the structure in place to get it done. And you have to be comfortable with that, right? And realize that that's what you're getting into. I personally loved it. I mean, as I said before about Orbital, the fact that you kind of come in and you say, yeah, it has to get done. Someone's got to do it, and everybody's just picking up jobs to do and figuring out how to do it is a really exhilarating environment. You make mistakes, of course, but you also can correct them really quick, in that environment. So you're going to learn in either. If you keep the right mindset, you're going to learn in either environment. You just learn differently, and it's really a question of where you feel the most comfortable in. And you got to realize also you don't have to stay there forever either. You can make changes over time on that side. And as I said, don't think that because you're in a bigger company doesn't mean you don't have the ability to innovate or be an entrepreneur. I mean, you can see, in two of the cases for me, we spun out divisions. Well, actually three, if you take Orbcom, we spun out divisions in that case. So, I personally liked it. I kind of realized at one point the last time I took a job that someone had before me was in 1986, back in the Air Force. So, it's fun to me to create the job that you're going to go into. So it's that environment, but you have to be careful for that. And when I've been offered jobs that I could say, yeah, in 10 years, I know where I'll be. I didn't really like that because it was too clear. I'd rather not have it that clear.
Let's dive a little bit more into that. You were able to do what we typically talk about as intrapreneurship, where you've been working within larger companies and be able to take and spin something out. How do you think that differs from the startup, that's trying to get their vision out? Clearly you had access to more resources than most early stage entrepreneurs. Even be able to walk in and have a few million of walking around money in an industry dealt with $4 billion investment or whatever it is. How did that process seem to work?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. In that case, there's a couple things I think you need to think about just personally at that point for the place that you're in. One, I was really lucky that the boss, the CEO of the company who I worked for, had an entrepreneurial spirit to him, right? He wasn't a startup guy. He was a big company guy. Nortel Networks. He was Bell Labs. He ran Bell Labs before they sold it to Telcordia. So he was a big company guy, but he was passionate about aviation and he was passionate about innovation. So when we kind of talked about this concept, he got it right away and was very supportive, right, of exploring this concept. And part of it is building credibility in the organization. So as you operate within that organization, you're delivering, you're being clear in your communications, not over setting expectations, etc. Builds up the credibility. So when you go ask, I got this concept, they'll trust you with it, right? And if you manage that money appropriately, they give you more leeway on it. So it's a little bit different. It's, for me personally, it was a good way to do it, right? Later in your career, when you got lots of obligations for kids and things like that, you tend to get less risk averse, in those things. So for me, it was a great situation to be able to start something brand new, in the confines of another company, because they did give us access to resources, right? I mean, to people, to HR, to legal resources that you'd have to pay for otherwise, that were basically done by a top quality teams in that case. But having said that, it was three of us to start, right? We had a finance guy, engineer who helped, was helping me on this, and me, that started it, right? So we had some walking around money, we got some outside help and some of the more technical aviation side of it, but we tried to keep that flavor. So much so that 3 years in, we were only maybe 12 people in the company at that point. Now, at this stage, we're about 85 people in the company, running a full 724 global operation, which is a great business, incidentally, to be able to sell a service around the world to all the countries and only have to do it with 85 people. It generates a good amount of cash. We try to keep an entrepreneurial environment, and it gets harder. Every time you hire a new person, in the company, it changes the culture, right? And you have to be cognizant of that, because otherwise, if you don't, it just ends up in kind of a mess. As you grow, it's easy to, overlook those problems while you grow and are so busy building and launching and all those kinds of things, that try to keep that environment. It gets harder for us every day, because we're, now that we're in operations, we sell to, air traffic control, the FAAs, the world, if you will, and it's a safety service. So, we basically are helping keep two planes safely apart, in places like the middle of the ocean. So, we can't screw up. It changes the culture to some degree. So we're thinking about, even internally now, how do we keep up that innovation, even with some of the new products and new capabilities we're putting out, because it's, an important part of this intrapreneurship issue is how do you kind of keep that, the dream big, but also keep the innovation, the energy, and the, the collaboration going.
And you managed to figure out a way to, get this incredible stream of data that nobody else had, but you still had to find a way to get somebody to pay you for it. So could you take us a little bit through the process of how do you go from having this really unique data to having this global set of customers that really value that data, sometimes for different reasons, maybe for different willingness to pay and different abilities to fund? How did the process of customer discovery development happen with this type of business?
It takes a lot of forethought, right? And then a lot of talking to people. And so, in our case, we came up with a hypothesis, right? Of, okay, if you were to provide 100% real-time surveillance of aircraft flying over the oceans, right? What could they do differently than they do now? And what benefit would that have to them? It's not something that I knew how to do off the top of my head. So I had to go out and get some people, to help us figure that out, experts in aircraft trajectories and fast time simulations and things like that. So we actually went out and got just some guys to go do that analysis for us. And they said, if you could give the controllers real-time access to those planes, they could now let them fly the most optimum trajectory from Europe to the US. They could fly closer, they fly at a better speed, not fly as far in distance. And we found out, well, you know what, you're going to save probably 2 to 4% fuel by doing that conservatively. That's the hypothesis. Then we went out and started talking to the FAA and talking to the Canadians and the UK and the Australians and Singapore, and started postulating this. And this has happened to me several times. You've got the right place when the person you're talking to pulls out the chart that is the same view of the cost savings that you're talking about. Because then you got something that makes sense. And that was the case with NAV Canada, our first investor. because they said, yeah, we think we can save probably, the airlines, their customers, about $120 per flight, per hour of flight. So we said, okay, well, we're going to charge you $40 an hour for flight, per flight, and airlines get to save the 80 million, we make 40 million, and that was the basis for the start of the business model. But obviously, you got to get more sophisticated after that. We then developed a global model looking at all the world's air traffic, on scheduled flights and what kind of airspace they fly in and what fuel savings they get, and et cetera, and came up with an pricing algorithm that is holding steady. I mean, the new contracts we signed this week are based on that same pricing model, and it just starts to build legs. But it's the research, and you got to go talk to the customer, and you got to validate it at the same level of credibility, with them, because if they don't believe it, right, you're kind of stuck. And that's happened to me several times in the case. So you're finding those experts to help you understand it, building and testing it, then builds credibility with the customer.
Some good questions in the chat channel. Amar, do you want to ask your question directly?
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering, so after you got your MBA, I mean, I know initially, right, your background was as an engineer. So was that sort of the point where you started shifting into sort of like all like the marketing side of things? Or did you use your business degree to sort of enhance, right, you as like an engineering leader?
Yeah, I kind of pulled the eject button on engineering, when I went to get the MBA, and when I got out of business school, I went right into sales and marketing. So I kind of immersed myself in the sales and marketing part of it, where I, was doing it all the time. But you can't get the engineer out of you, right? I mean, I was still an engineer at heart, and it helped, quite frankly, on the analytical side. But it was at that point where I basically was running kind of sales and marketing, efforts, marketing programs. I got into, corporate development activities, which is where I learned about financing, raising money for companies, bringing companies public, that kind of stuff. That was, just a vital thing to learn. So,
Matt, do you want to ask your follow-up?
Yeah. So I was just wondering, with regards to going for an MBA, I've heard some from different people in different companies that once you kind of go for it, you kind of lock yourself into that more business track, and that you kind of lock yourself out of more traditional engineering style jobs.
I haven't seen that the case. I think it's a personal decision at that point. I think it opens up the potential for other jobs that may be still technical but have a business bent, like product development or product management, which is good blend between technical. I mean, the best product managers that I ever saw were engineers that also had MBAs. So I think it's more of what you want to do, Matt. If anyone tells you something locks you into something, then you shouldn't listen to them at all, right? Because that's that's not the case. And if the company's telling you that, go find another place to work, because you guys are going to have more opportunities, to work wherever you want to, as long as you go out and look for it. I mean, you're going to be finding good engineers is tough. So you're going to. I wouldn't worry too much about that. It gives you more options at that point. It's really a question for you personally, what you want to do.
And Don, we've interacted a lot this year with RSE, the Rensselaer Society of Engineers. I wanted to ask you, you've been investing a lot of time talking to us, talking to other people on campus. Number one, what was instrumental about your experiences in the organization while you're at Rensselaer that is causing you to have this attachment and invest this time? And secondarily, what do you see as kind of that future, that organization that you're hoping to help the transition to?
Yep, that's great. No, at least one person on the call knows what a Rensselaer Society of Engineers is. But for those of you who don't, Rensselaer Society of Engineers it's a social fraternity on campus. It is the building located behind the student union. I was a member of that back in the day. It's a pretty unique organization in that it was founded 154 years ago. As a technical engineering and technical society associated solely with your Rensselaer. So it's not a national. It doesn't have basically the 800 alumni of the organization or the the members and own the property and work with the students that are student members. The networking and relationships you build, in working in an environment where you're kind of working with multidisciplinary people, around a common common goal, at that point. And at that time it was the social fraternity, so the common goal is maintaining the house and running the facility and the philanthropic stuff we did. Of course, back in the 80s you had parties and things like that you could do at at organizations like that. But the real thing got out of it was the ability to build relationships, network around a common mission, if you will. Now, part of what we're doing at RSC now is that old model, the sole social fraternity model, seems to be dated, in all of our mind. The students, current students, the alumni, and just the environment, especially at a school like Rensselaer, which is obviously much more technology focused and more, I'm going to say, more motivated, dedicated to kind of the career and professional side of it. So what the alumni and current members have been thinking about is, okay, how do we position this organization for the next 150 years, right? Because we are part of Rensselaer. We don't belong anywhere else. So we actually went on a process not unlike what we were just talking about. And thanks to Kelly and Jason are actually really putting it around the model I think you guys use on the business model canvas activity. But we put a survey out. We had a retreat where we had something over 47% of our members responded to the survey. We had 70 something members get on a virtual retreat on a Saturday morning for 4 hours to talk about what is the future of an organization like RSC. And really what we found out was a lot of members were involved in startups, in entrepreneurial ventures like mine, or moved into finance, etc. And we said there seemed to be quite a bit of energy about revising the mission of the organization to really move away from the traditional social fraternity into a organization that's building a kind of living, learning, collaboration community around innovation, entrepreneurship, career development, networking. So what we're doing now is kind of taking these concepts and we're pulling together a team of current students that are interested in this type of concept and help us to go out and just talk to students, test these ideas and concepts, test the new mission of the organization, and help us figure out how to restructure it in a way that we can hit the ground running in a big way next year and start building into something new, something that's really more focused, as I said, on career development, professional development for the students, networking for everybody, and you're really building something around using that facility, which as a collaboration and innovation area for new ideas among students.
That sounds awesome. So we're dedicated to helping Don coordinate with current students. So if that sounds interesting and you want to get involved, just reach out to Kelly or I, and we can definitely connect you to the right folks. Awesome. Well, we're right at time. Let me ask one last question. We tried to ask all of our presenters. If you were a student at RPI today, what do you think you would catch your attention? What you'd be working on? Would you be aiming for space again, or what do you think you would be doing?
I guess I would say do what you like to do. Do something that interests you and dig into it and try to understand as much as you can about it, because you're going to get hundreds of those things over your lifetime, but you'll find the one that ultimately gets really is the one that you want to do. But don't do something because someone else told you to do it, right? Or someone told you that it's the right track to go on. There's hundreds of thousands of tracks to go on. So just start with something you like, invest your time and energy on it, and change quickly. If you find you don't really like it that much, then don't be afraid to go do something else, at that point, because life's too short and to get stuck doing stuff that you don't like doing.
All right, let's give Don a hand here.
All right, thanks. Good luck to you all.
Thank you all for your attention. Thanks for attending. Thanks again, Don, for everything. See you all back next week to talk to Jeff.